The organizations which know where they are and what they are doing, where they stand today, they are going to do better than their competitors. What works best with the people who are going to work for the business. We at Hono have created multiple processes which are tech-enabled, enabling HR as a function to drive these transformations in productivity area, in talent management area, talent engagement area, building world-class employee experience. So there are moments of truth which needs to be measured, monitored, impacted. So we have created a lot of processes around it over last 2 years, and many organizations have benefited from this, which is a completely tech and people driven journey, which we have enabled over this entire cycle. So the entire life cycle of the employee, from their joining to managing their leadership role, their learning curve, their performance management, and their journey thereafter, even after when they have left the organization, needs to be measured constantly and acted upon. The insights which are driven by these processes give a lot of action power to the entire HR team to work in a timely manner with complete informed decisions.
All of us have evolved in this last couple of years, moving to a complete kind of remote working, and then evolved ourselves to a hybrid kind of an environment where there's no perfect solution, and with a lot of resistance coming from most of the employees to get back to work because they've adjusted their lifestyle accordingly. That leaves us with a sort of a permanent situation to deal with. We recognize this, and we are also cognizant of the fact that we are not going to have 100% ideal solution to prescribe or say. All of us realize in this workplace, new definition of the new age, we're talking about machines having entered for sure, in addition to all the demographics that we have from an employee standpoint. So machines are going to be absolutely included. And we may have, at stages, even a machine sitting in the boardroom or sitting as an acting CEO, God knows. I mean, that could be the end state. Let us visualize that, number one. Number two is tech in this workflow is definitely going to be an important aspect. What used to be conventional employee life cycle for all of us is something where we're going to weave in some of the aspects of technology very strongly. And the third one is the entire coexistence of all of this in the workplace. So we were used to a very, very periphery as far as workplace is concerned. Now we realize it's going to be hybrid. Now let's look at the challenge from an employee life cycle standpoint. Recruitment, where there's a considerable amount of AI penetration that has gone in. And we want to be aware of the fact the session is all about reducing bias, reducing the entire prejudices that we may have, and using technology as a layer and enhancing the entire value. So take every single example, whether it is recruitment or whether it is onboarding or whether it is the employee experience part of it, we're going to think through in terms of how we can possibly see the future and how we can walk that particular journey. People of my vintage, we clearly used to do massive amount of engagement surveys. We used to do OD interventions. We used to plan it across 12 to 18 months and then used to figure out what are the swing factors. By the time I think things would have undergone change, those were the conventional stuff. Yes, we moved to very clear point solutions where we started doing a lot of pulse now. Can we think of the next stage where we are talking about engagements? Why do we even need to be talking? Why do we even need to be doing surveys? If there are deep technologies today where one can do a lot through sentiment analysis, if we could do sentiment analysis for the customer, can we not do for our own employees? There lies the challenge. So we will have a lot of cognitive diversity to be included in the D&I space, and that's the first step which I'm trying to talk about. Cognitive diversity would mean technology coming into the workplace, and where we use technology and where we include everything. For example, today in a hybrid environment, somebody is sitting far away and where you can't even feel, how on earth are we going to get the engagement? Would you know his mood? Would you know what kind of it? And all along, have we not done only the expressed behavior? There's a lot sitting as unexpressed behavior, which needs to be picked up through sentiment analysis.
Very varied reasons that employees face in the organization that leads to a very predominant attrition in the organization, and that is what is bothering most of the organizations even now, especially in the tech industry. And to look into it directly as humans is something that is definitely possible, but a bit more complicated in terms of processes. So I think in this we need to plug in the factor of technology, and which definitely, just to note out, is a decision support tool rather than a final decision tool to look into, because if we use it as a support tool, it will help us evolve our processes to a point where we are eradicating the attrition, and enabling talent retention would be a plus. And now if we talk about how do we basically do that, or what are the ways in which we could do that, well, there are a couple of ways. There could be a lot of ways to do that process-wise. And as Aditya was talking about the four type of employees that fits into one of them, and definitely each and every employee falls under one of these categories. At Hono, what we have seen is that of the employees who are leaving the organization or who have left the organization, it's a very systematic classification from our R&D and surveys that we have took. It's a 4-3-3 bracketing ratio that we have seen from large corporates to even some startups, in which 4 ratio are the percent of people who can easily be convinced to retain the organization, and then 3 is someone which needs a bit more elaborate convincing, and then last 3 ratio is the employees who would be difficult to retain. Might change, but yes, difficult to retain. And our focus is on the first 70% of the employees who would have higher chances of retaining in the organization. And that is, I think, what we look into.
Do you really think the great resignation has happened because of the compensation war, or are these people who are changing the job and you might be closer to the community are looking for something else in the market?
To answer your question, many people do form on the opinion that compensation is the reason that employees are tending to leave the organization. That is a factor of the great resignation. But actually, it's compensation is a big part of that, not to deny that. But more importantly, even very thorough investigations and studies by McKinsey as well as some other organizations have revealed that it's not just the compensation. More important to that are some other factors, and that is something that we also see that dominate as to if an employee would leave the organization or not. And there are many factors, and that definitely responds to the culture of the organization, the management, how they are leading the organization in that vertical, what is the work alignment that the employees have. So it's not just compensation. Compensation forms a part only when the other factors are diminished. When there's no incentive for the other factors to rise, then the employee only thinks of compensation. But if there's a price or a evolving of the other factors as well, then compensation is something that employees do keep aside to an extent.
We have seen a lot of change in the past couple of years, and there has been a lot of turbulent times that the organizations have gone through. Now, has there been any reflection of these changes that have happened in the ecosystems in which organizations operate, whether it could be technology ecosystem, talent ecosystem, the whole business scenario itself? Any reflections of this that we see, on leadership and the expectation of employees there too?
I think this eventually had to happen. The change, whether it is technology or the way of our working. I think pandemic has just accelerated the whole piece, which we probably were expecting would happen over the next 5 to 7 years, 10 years.
Right.
It's happened in 2 years. I think organizations are still kind of debating as to how to cope with it. So what it has brought to the forefront is, we love to use those jargons called VUCA world and all that earlier. It is right in front of you, but it's happened. And you just can't wish away from it, So, for the leaders who were agile, survived, and leaders who were not agile, learned to be agile because finally ghar pe chalana. You've got to survive. So it's the survival instinct that made us do. The good part is, all the businesses, most of the businesses, I would say, did well. Corporations did well, their revenues grew, their profitability grew, so I think that's good part. So in adversity also, we have seen people react in a manner that's been good for the business.
I see two fundamental changes happening, addition to what Sandeep has said. One is, when you think about leaders earlier, it was all about the why, the vision, what you do as a leader, how you do it. So profitability, revenues, market share, VC funding, all those are important. Now, I'm not saying these are not important anymore. This will still be important, but those are what leaders get paid for, right? We get salaries for that. We have to do it. Now, from this why, how, and what is really changed, I think, is the who, right? Who you are as a person is as important as the whys and the hows and the whats.
I think the reflection of values and the culture piece that you spoke about is absolutely important. I think that sets what the expectation of employees could be, rather than employees stating that this is what I need, right? So it is actually a mutual process. So that's very good thought. I heard a word which was agility from you, Sandeep Girotra, right? So I'm going to address as Sandeep Girotra and Sandeep Gautam. So I know you're very passionate about Sandeep about agility, right? So any thoughts on that point? Of course, that will reflect back upon what employees seek from leaders, but what's your thought on that?
In a disruptive world for last, I think, a decade or so, business disruptions are happening. The entire technology has created a lot of ripple in the business system, and people are trying to catch up. But I think this pandemic has disrupted everything, and two things have happened. One is, I think, is the topmost person in the organization, the promoter or the owner or the CEO, and the last person. Everyone, came to a same level because they were not allowed to go out, and they had personal agony. And when this kind of a big thing happens, this pandemic, so it doesn't leave anyone. So there's no hierarchy there. So one is that boundary has broken. So I think we all are agile. We were on a comfort zone, and we were not adapting those kind of things. Right. I think this is very important as we go along and move forward. Now businesses are back on track, largely, I would say.
So are you also trying to say that a leader being agile or the ecosystem being agile, the employees will or the employees will or people will automatically demand agility from the system once you actually display that?
They are expecting.
They're expecting that.
The point
right?
is,
okay.
we at a leadership level, we decide something.
Right.
Sometimes we don't know what people want.
Right.
Fine.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the time has come when we ask the employees what they want, and agility everyone wants.
Right. Right.
And agility from other side, people
Right.
want more.
One interesting thing that we could bring out of this discussion also is that leadership, I think, is always connected with a word called, controllership, for that matter. But I think the paradigms would have changed at this point in time. So, Sandeep, to you it is. Do you still see that leadership is being controllership and being accepted well in the organization, or I think times have changed where the expectations has to be other way around.
I think the expectation from people and from businesses has changed of what you want leaders to do, what leaders should be doing. So I think there was a time when leaders were operationally involved in day-to-day stuff. A lot of times people would say, look, I'm a hands-on leader, and we all have heard of this phrase, very hands-on leader. And that's all good, great, absolutely fine. But then it kind of moved up the value chain and said, look, I'm a hands-on leader, but I'm not a hands-on leader, I delegate, but I have control mechanisms in place, operating rhythm is very good. And I've worked for those companies where it was all great. Then comes, now I think it's more where leaders are expected to be stewards.
Right.
So I'm not expecting my manager to be a hands-on manager operationally trying to do what I'm doing. So, I get paid to do what my job is, and I would like my manager to actually do the job that he's supposed to be paid to do.
Right.
But if he or she starts doing it for me, I don't like it. I want him or her to be a steward. I want him or her to be standing by me, besides me, and grooming me to the next level. And if he or she doesn't have that capability, then he's not fit enough to be a manager.
Right.
So the definition of manager, leader is changing from an operationally strong, hands-on manager to a controller to really now stewards. So I think that's a big tectonic shift that is going to happen. Those leaders who have realized this are the ones who would succeed. The leaders who have not realized this probably will fall by, and they will have to make way.
Yeah, I think that's I'm very boldly put, Sandeep. I think very few people will have that boldness to say, it's time for me to phase out. Because that persistence, of course, keeps the leaders up, every day. So very, very good point. Thank you so much for these thoughts.